All right, today's scripture reading comes from Psalms 139, verses 1 through 18, Pew Bible, page 427. Yes. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book. Before one of them came to be, how precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. Then, when I awake, I am still with you.
Thanks, Dante. Good morning. Great to see everyone here today. Let me start out just by saying this. Because of passages like Dante just read, the church, and I'm not just talking about Waite Park Church, I'm talking about the church right from the very beginning, has always been for life. Because we always have believed that every human person is made in the image of God, and because of that has intrinsic worth, not because of any value that we have in society or any utility, but simply because we are human beings. We're made in the image of God. And that's played itself out in a number of different ways. Of course, one of the ways was right from the beginning, the church was against abortion and what's called infant exposure. And these were both common practices in the Roman Empire, actually. They would, some who could afford it would actually do abortions if they had an unwanted child, or if they couldn't afford an abortion, they would just simply have the baby and then they would leave it to die of exposure. And of course, the church was appalled by this, and so they actually would go around and look for infants that were being left for exposure, and they would adopt them and raise them as their own. And that's one way that they were committed to life. You know, they weren't going and rallying at the Capitol, not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but they didn't have that power. They lived in the Roman Empire. And so the way they did that was through some very practical and some very life-altering ways. But it wasn't just for babies and for unborn people either. It was for everyone. I've talked about before how in around 160 AD and 260 AD, there were some plagues that were in the Roman Empire that some historians say wiped out about a third of the population. And so during that time, even the doctors were fleeing for the hills, afraid for their life. But what happened? The church stayed. And they actually would pull people out of gutters. And many of them even took that disease upon themselves and died as a result. But they were so committed to the value of life that they went out of their way to make sure that life happened. And so that's been the case, all throughout Christian history. Today's testimony is one that I think will be a great illustration of this, and it actually intersects with a lot of other issues that happen within the church and actually within our society as well. And so I have asked Kirsti Mauthe to come and to share with you some of what's been happening in their life. If you've been a part of this church for a while and you get some of the prayer emails, then you're at least vaguely familiar with what's been going on with them, but we're going to tell the whole story today. So, welcome, Kirsti.
Thank you.
Glad you're joining us today.
Thank you for having me. No, it works, huh?
All right, for those here who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, how long you've been coming to Waite Park, and all that.
Perfect. So my name's Kirsti. I have been attending Waite Park with my husband, Ben, for almost 9 years now. I actually had to think about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was right when we got married. So, we love it here. I have a son, Leo. He is almost 6. I have a daughter, Lainey, and she is 3. And then we have our newest, little Eli. He is 6 weeks old. Love Waite Park, by the way. We've been involved in kids ministries and other small group activities. And I am going to say this, that in case you guys didn't know, Rebecca Ballard is my sister. And that is why we are always together.
Right.
Our small group was like, that makes so much sense. So Auntie's holding Eli right now.
That, yeah. I can remember, I remember how you got here, right? You sent Kevin on a scouting mission. And so he came and he sat right over here 9 years ago and was checking it out, and it must have been an okay experience for him because then you all came back and you sat over here the next week or week after. Actually, that was about when you were getting married.
Yeah,
so I think there was like a
2-week
gap or something in there, and then after you got married, then you all came back. And
Kevin over there was our scouter of many churches.
Yeah. So good. Well, I'm glad we made the cut.
You did.
So tell us a little bit about like your spiritual background. Where did you come from? Have you always had faith?
Yep. So I grew up in the church. My parents were very involved in the church. We went to a Lutheran church when we were younger in southern Minnesota. So I did youth group Wednesday nights, Lutheran church Sundays, but I also went to a Catholic school because it was down the street. So I was at Mass Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and Catholic school all through the week. So I feel like I was very immersed in the Bible and in God, and I always had faith. We did mission trips, volunteering. I even had faith, I said, even when I wasn't regularly attending, which was in college, but always definitely believed in God, and yeah.
Yeah, and that's just carried on through.
Carried on through my whole life.
Marriage and all of that. All right, so you said you have 3 kids today, and you have had varying levels of struggle as far as having kids is concerned. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I've always loved kids, and I always wanted a huge family. After Ben and I got married, we started trying a couple years later and got pregnant, which was really exciting. Saw the heartbeat at 8 weeks, saw it again, and it was growing, and then all of a sudden had some spotting, and we lost that baby at 13 weeks, which is after the 12-week mark, when you should be safe. So that was my first miscarriage. That came with a lot of hurt. I was just miserable. I've never had depression or anxiety, and I did after that. And then come to fruition, I've actually had 3 miscarriages, all late first trimester losses, and we had to do infertility treatments. It was me, mainly, and so we did infertility treatments for all of our children, for Leo, Lainey, and little Eli. They've been so wanted and so prayed for, and we just I feel very, very blessed. But also those struggles of having miscarriages was just unbelievable. My body had missed miscarriages, meaning that it didn't recognize that I was losing the baby, so I kept feeling sick. My uterus kept growing. I had to go in and have DNCs, they call it, which is you sign a paper that it's abortion of a non-living fetus, because they had to get the babies out of me, because otherwise my body wasn't going to pass them. And that honestly was just a very, very dark time in my life. Totally had to lean on God for everything during that time. Just tons of prayer, and I don't know how to explain it. Yeah.
So last fall, in October, you found out you were pregnant, and you didn't tell people you were pregnant until you got out of the safe zone, right? And where the potential for miscarriage drops considerably, although that wasn't necessarily the case for you, so we can understand why you were a little bit skittish about doing that. But in the process of all of the tests and that they were doing, the doctors found some issues with the baby. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yep. We found out we were pregnant in October, November-ish, and really excited because we did have to do infertility treatments. We just kind of left it up to God. My doctor was retiring in December, so we had 3 months to try. And we just said, if God wants us to have a third child, then we will have a third child in those 3 months. And if not, then that is, and we'll be done trying because we didn't want to start over with new doctors and all of that. So with our other 2 children, we did not do any genetic testing at all. And then we just had our normal scans. But with Eli, I ended up being really sick my first trimester from influenza, RSV, all of the good stuff that we got last fall with kids being back in school. I had a fever for the first 20 days of my pregnancy. My anxiety was just sky high because they kept saying, keep your fever down, keep your fever down. I couldn't keep my fever down. I was in the urgent care nonstop. So my anxiety was just terrible. I thought I'm going to lose this baby or something's going to be wrong with them. And I started Googling. I really enjoy Dr. Google when my anxiety is high, which is not good at all, by the way.
Doesn't help a lot, does
No,
it?
it does not help at all. But so we did. My OB, who knows my stance on life, just said, you should do genetic testing. Your insurance covers it for the NIPT, which I can explain, and then you'll get an ultrasound at 13 weeks, and that will just relieve your anxiety, that everything is okay, that your baby is healthy, your baby is safe. So I did that. Got the NIPT blood draw from me. Everything looked great. Nothing was wrong. Got the ultrasound at 13 weeks. Felt great. Baby looked amazing. That honestly really did help my anxiety. I thought, okay, we're in the clear. He'll make it, and everything looks healthy. But we didn't tell anybody I was pregnant with the other 2 because of all the losses. We did tell our small group with Eli and a few close friends because we needed prayer, right off the bat. It was just please pray for me and the baby. So we did tell them. Yeah. And then we went in for our 20-week ultrasound, and then things changed.
All right. So what did they find at your 20-week ultrasound?
So Ben was with me, thank the Lord, and we went in, and there was just an anatomy scan where they check all the body parts. And right off the bat, she said that he had a cleft lip and cleft palate, which is, the gap right in the mouth. And I wasn't surprised. And she looked at me and she's like, did you know? And I was like, no. And she's like, why are you not surprised? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, right from the beginning of my pregnancy, when I was sick, I just felt like something maybe was a little off. And I Googled it, and infection can cause cleft lip and palate. So that's fixable, right? No problem. So I was just like, okay, continue on. So she scanned him forever, which seemed like forever. And she really honed in on heart and brain. And so then after she was done, she was all positive and saw baby moving, right? And we went back to the consultation room for the OB to come in, or the high-risk doc. He came in and said, I need you to come back, and I'm going to scan you myself. And instantly my heart sank. I was like, something is wrong, because that's never happened before. I've been pregnant 6 times, never had an actual MFM high-risk doctor say they need to scan me. So I texted my mom and my sister. I said, I need prayers. We need prayer that everything's okay with the baby. Something is wrong. And Ben thought maybe heart. I was thinking brain. We went back in, and he scanned him for, again, what seemed like hours. And we were there for 5 hours, by the way, before finding out. And then, they brought us back to the consultation room and said that your baby is missing part of his brain. They said we can't see the CSP, that's the septum pellucidum, which is really suggesting that he has, I'm going to use big words and I'll tell you exactly what it is, agenesis of his corpus callosum, which means he's missing the connecting structure between the right and left hemisphere. And so that was first of all, I'm medical, by the way. My background is in healthcare, and I know anatomy and human phys, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, what are you talking? And Ben is just sitting there white as a ghost. And he said, here are your options. And then the genetic counselor comes in right away. Here are your options. You can terminate, or we can do further testing. And this all happens. We're like, what?
Okay, so back up a little bit. So missing the, what did you call it?
It's the connecting structure. So it's the nerves and the fibers that connect your right and left hemisphere. So it helps them communicate between each other.
And so what's the range of possibilities that could
Yeah.
happen if you don't have that.
He said that he actually did tell us right away that kids can be very normal or they could be severely, severely disabled. It's a spectrum disorder. They said a lot of it's highly likely on or highly dependent on what other things are wrong. So does he have chromosome abnormalities? Does he have a deletion of a gene or a variation? Does he have any heart defects? Anything down? They call it a midline defects. So because his brain right in the middle was gone, in the cleft, they were very suspecting that he had major midline, right down the middle of your body, abnormalities, and said that, he gave us the 50% chance potential normal life with moderate disabilities or like learning, cognitive, social. And then they said, 20 to 30% moderate at this stage, meaning like Down syndrome type of a disability. They'd always live with you, couldn't really work. And then the 10 to 15% severe, meaning they're like severely disabled. Some likely mostly intellectual, but it could be physical, not walk, not talk, not feed themselves, not eat. And I hate to use this term, like human vegetable, like they're just laying there because they can't do anything for themselves. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely a possibility. And they did say over and over, right in the beginning too, that we're highly suspecting this is genetic. Not that it's passed down by Ben or I, because we obviously don't have it, but that something happened. And then if you have the genetic anomaly, that increases your risk of severe disability. And they kept saying that we're highly suspecting it's genetic, we're highly suspecting it's genetic.
So even though the genetic tests that you had earlier came back normal, you decided we're going to do more genetic testing to figure out what is the cause of this, right? Because that makes a difference.
Yep.
If it's genetic, then it's more likely to be very severe. If it's not genetic, more likely to be mild.
Yep.
Okay, and so they did that, and so what happened with those?
So we did an amniocentesis, which in itself has risks, and it was terrible, to have them do really, really deep genetic testing. Our insurance covered it because of his anomalies, where they looked at every single gene of every single strand of DNA of him, and Ben and I as well. We had to sign our lives over pretty much saying that if there's something wrong with us, we may not be able to have life insurance and all these different things, which we didn't know about, by the way, until we were there for the procedure, which was awful. I'm like, why wouldn't you tell you this prior to signing up for a procedure?
Here, make this decision in 5 minutes.
Seriously,
right?
They did. They had us sit there and sign this off, and we're like, okay. But then, so we did that, and then we also did fetal MRIs, where they did an MRI of him in utero, and they also did fetal echoes to make sure his heart was okay. We also did further ultrasounds to make sure the rest of the midline was fine. And mainly for all of that was, some people decide not to do anything and they're just going to continue on with the pregnancy. Most people, which I asked flat point blank, I asked the genetic counselor, I'm like, what do most people do in this situation? And she said they terminate. Like most people in their clinic.
Without having any
further testing, they just terminate.
Or anything like that, they just terminate.
Because, you hear your baby is missing part of his brain, and you're like, and they, you just freak. And we did testing mainly because it would help us understand how severely disabled he would be. And quality of life really mattered to us as well.
So you would know kind of what to expect.
Yes, I did. Yep. So we would know what to expect. To be prepared as much as possible.
So when the doctor told you that most people, when they get even the information that you got, which was not a lot at that point, that most people terminate, what went through your mind?
Why? No, it was honest. I would say, when we were talking about this, Kory, I said, if you asked me at 19 weeks, 6 days, if I would ever terminate, no, hard no. Never even crossed my mind. We never even had a discussion because we would never terminate a child, ever. So our children were so deeply wanted, right? We prayed, it was hard for us, and we loved them from the second they were in my body, even before. But then when you're told that your child could have a terrible quality of life, and told over and over to think about him, what's his quality of life going to be? Don't think about yourself. How will it impact him? Would you want to live like he's going to live? That was like a punch in the stomach. It was, and then at that point, you feel you can't just think about yourself, right? And then I had others that we loved, like family members even, that were very close to us, say, think about how it's going to impact your marriage. Think about how it's going to impact your current children. Think about how it's, your whole life has changed. You might not be able to work. You might have someone with you that lives with you that's highly dependent on you your entire life. You'll be able to retire and travel. Not that, don't worry, Ben doesn't like traveling, so we're fine there. But I'm like, and then especially when they brought up Leo and Lainey, it was just like, that was just like, they are my children, and I love them more than anything. And then how would it impact them? Like, I wouldn't be able to give them enough attention, do the things they want to do.
Yeah. And that was something that was very, actually compelling to Ben, because for as long as he can remember, has had real compassion for children who are suffering, right? So that's like tugging at the heartstrings for sure for Ben. And not that you don't care about him. But
No, that was Ben's biggest thing. Even like since, we were in small groups or even praying at night. It's like, who do you want to pray for? Our prayer request, Ben's always sick children.
Yeah.
His heart aches for those children that are in the hospital suffering. And it's hard to grasp, right? You don't want anyone to suffer or be miserable, and he just thinks especially young kids.
Yeah.
And then to think that we might bring this child in this world knowing that they're going to suffer, that was really, really hard to wrestle with.
So this is where I want to stop here for a minute, because you have to understand that life is very complicated. All right, and I'm not going to back down that we are committed to life. Okay, we are absolutely committed to life. But I think oftentimes in our circles, there's this sense that people who are pro-choice or pro-abortion or whatever you want to call it are just people who want to have as much wild, unprotected sex as they want and then just abort the babies. And I'm sure that happens some. But actually, this situation is much more common than what you might know. And it starts to, what I want you to see is that there's a real dilemma here, right? Because I think, quality of life is something that does tug at our heartstrings. Do we want to bring people into the world who have a severe disability? Still committed to life, still committed to that position. But I think what it ought to do is it at least ought to change our posture toward people who are making these decisions. And it also means that being pro-life has to be something more than just voting for pro-life candidates, more than just picketing or demonstrating at the Capitol and things like that. It has to be, you have to be willing to get into the messiness of life and to be involved in people's life. And even like when you're advocating for it, to understand that you have friends and you have other people in your life that are facing these difficult decisions. And hopefully, even though I hope you remain committed to life, I hope what it does is you start to understand a little bit of the difficult situations that people are going through and have compassion for people, and that it'll change even the way that you talk to people and the way that you advocate for life. Still do it by all means. It's important. It's critical. Okay? But understand that life is complicated, and so don't be dismissive of people who have a different position than you do. Be ready to get into those difficult things and be willing to understand what people are going through, because even though all along you said, hard no, we're having this baby, it started to, I don't know, maybe they're right.
Yeah. And so we did all those tests. So Minnesota, as you all know, has the law that you can terminate at any stage. Where we go to our hospital that we go to, the U or Fairview, is 24 weeks. And so they're like, you need to decide by 24 weeks. And so we just plowed through testing. And like I said, the whole time, it was likely a hard no. But there was still, I'm just shocked to even say that as a strong Christian my entire life, always pro-life, that it did, just trigger. I had to think about it, and Ben had to think about it, and it was hard.
So in the end, what would have been like that line where you'd have said, okay?
Well, yeah, I think and I don't even know. So I think most of it was maternal risk for me. If my life was at risk, then that probably would have been a hard line.
And you've had friends who.
Yes,
have
I was going to
had
say,
that.
we actually did have a friend that did end up having to terminate. Her child, which is in the last 2 years, was born, or it's not born, but at their 20-week scan, she did not have a skull at all. She had a very, very rare neurological disorder where the baby, was completely incompatible with life. There was no possibility she would ever live. And then my friend was becoming septic, which is a high infection. So she was really, really sick. So in the end, it was safest for her and the child that she had to terminate. But it was the absolute the hardest thing that she's ever had to do in her life. And still, coming to terms with the fact that, in the end, she did have to terminate her child, even though they were completely incompatible with life. Yeah, so I think it was hard. It's all hard. Because I just know, now I know, in dealing with people that are going through these situations as me, that you can say all you want or think what you want until you're in your shoes. Because I was the same way. And then all of a sudden, someone's throwing these things at you in your mind. It's crazy. A, how the devil takes hold, and then B, that things happen that you never realized.
Yeah. And your commitment to life hasn't changed.
No, yeah.
Your compassion for people who are having to make these hard decisions
100%
has grown.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was telling my sister about this too. I'm like, prior I thought people who terminate were just people that didn't want their children, right? So we're going to terminate because they're not wanted. We didn't want to have kids. We just, I don't know, whatever. Right. But now I realize, especially in the medical field, that many people really, really, really wanted their children, but they're terminating out of fear. And a lot of people, too, out of lack of support. So I'm seeing in these Facebook groups that I joined, by the way, I was very anti-social media prior to this happening. I don't even think Ben and I are married on social media. That shows you how often I'm on there. And it was and people are wrestling with this all the time. They have no support. Their family doesn't want them to keep the child. They don't have childcare. They don't have anybody. And then they're getting thrown these diagnoses, and and then they terminate. Especially too when you're in there, and that's really all of the options. It's okay, keep the baby, do it yourself, or terminate. There's no here, reach out to these support groups, or reach out to this, or talk to this, or here's a therapist. It's nothing. It's flat out, here's your diagnosis, your child's going to be disabled, you can terminate or keep it. Which was really, I was just so sad. I was so sad. I was so mad. I really strongly disliked a lot of people. And I'm sure they were really nice people, but I usually like everybody. I did not like them. I was I do not like her. I couldn't even see her picture on the wall. Because it was just so heartbreaking that this is what people have to deal with. And that most people terminate because disabilities aren't, I don't know.
Yeah.
That those people aren't valued, or are they terminating because they think they're helping?
Yeah.
They're helping that child.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, so you did the genetic testing, found out it wasn't genetic.
Yes.
And so did you get any assurances that Eli would not have any disabilities or anything like that?
No, we did not get any assurances. We did get really, really huge answers to prayer, though, which was our small group, our friends' churches, everybody. We asked everybody, my work. Everyone was praying for us that the genetic testing came back negative. So that was a huge answer to prayer. His MRI came back positive, meaning that he had ACC, which we knew, but there was no other anomalies, which was a huge answer to prayer. Echo, positive. His heart was great.
All the fingers and toes.
All the fingers and toes. Everything looked really good. So we had those answers to prayer, which we knew he could potentially be on the mild side. But even if with the ACC, you just don't know. He could be that 10%. And that was also hard for Ben and I because we're usually in the less than 1%, right? The 98%. Once you see the baby's heart rate, it's a 2% chance of miscarriage. Well, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
ACC in itself is 0.05% of the population. It's a rare disorder, so it's we're never in that 98. We're always so that was also hard.
You're due though, right?
Yeah, we're due. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, God. Hear that? Yeah, but we didn't have in the end, we chose life, but we didn't have any answers and we still don't.
Yeah.
No.
What about peace? How do you have peace?
We got peace. I think it was just, there's a lot of factors that provided us with peace. Obviously, prayer was huge. So tons of prayer. I mean, I think I just prayed, and Ben and I and everybody prayed all day, every day, nonstop. And that provided that unsurpassable, you can't even understand it, in Philippians 4:6, that peace that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing that gave us peace besides God, especially after we decided.
Not even Google.
No, Google definitely not. But I will say, too, like I was telling Kory, I'm like, so I was very anti-social media, as you know. But I did find during my Dr. Google researches, one dad said, if you're struggling with this diagnosis, join this Facebook group. It's so many positive stories. So when you Google ACC, you hear negative, 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 and you see the worst. So I joined the group on Facebook, which was during Lent, which I gave up all social media stuff for Lent, like Pinterest, everything. And I think God said it was okay. And it was really, really, really positive. There were so many parents posting pictures of their children and how loved they were. And even those that's, not disabled to severely disabled, but everyone was just so proud and in love with their children. And it really gave me peace. It was like, hey, I'm not alone, right? Because I didn't know anyone that had a child with a disability. No one in my family has had a disability. None of my friends, none of my coworkers. So that was just really a fear of mine. It was like, I don't even know what to expect, and I'm alone, right? Like, I'm going to be doing this all alone. And so that was super helpful. There's no one else in that group that was from Minnesota, but it was all over the world, and we were all in it together. So that was really helpful, Facebook. And I did tell the MFM doctors, I told them, I said, if there's anything that you can take from me, can you please direct people with this diagnosis to this Facebook group? Because I got nothing besides, here's a research paper. Literally, I got a research paper saying this is what ACC is.
And most people terminate.
But then if you go on the Facebook group and you see like the people that are living it, not the doctors who just see the brain, but you're seeing the people that are living it, I think it would just completely turn the outlook on a lot of people's thoughts, because it gave me a huge sense of peace.
Yeah.
I will say, too, it's not for everybody. Research isn't for everybody, because Ben didn't like the research. He preferred to not know anything.
Yeah.
But
okay. So here's another issue that comes up. I don't know if you know this, but many, perhaps most Christian families who have a child with disability do not go to church, or don't go to church very often. And the reason is because churches are so ill-equipped to deal with it. And it just becomes very difficult. And this is also an area where, like our society, the focus on the nuclear family, I think, can be very unhealthy too. Now, I believe in the family. I think the family is something that is God-given in that. But not just the nuclear family. Because so many of us live so far away from our extended family, oftentimes we feel like we're alone. Okay, so now put yourself in the shoes of someone who just gets a diagnosis like this. They live far away from family. They don't have a church family. And they feel like they're alone and they're going to have to deal with it by themselves, right? And so this is where I believe that so much, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks, that as a church, we have got to recapture the idea of the church as family. Mm-hmm. And not just, in name only, not just that we call each other brother and sister, but that we actually do the things that families do. Imagine how different it is if we, for Ben and Kirsti, right? Yeah, again, we don't know what will, what the future holds for Eli and for Ben and Kirsti. But what if they knew they had 100 brothers and sisters to be able to help out in any way? There's nothing more pro-life than that. And we have not always done a great job of it. But I think it's something to keep in our not the back of our minds, the front of our minds. As we think about situations like Ben and Kirsti, and they're not the only ones, right? Physical disabilities, not the only types of disabilities, all right? So we have to see each other as family, and be willing to step in as family would. All right. For those of you who haven't met Eli yet, I think we have a picture. I don't remember if I put it up there. Phil,
okay.
did I get a picture up there? What's that? Oh, he's here too, but also we have a picture. Okay, 6 weeks old. How's he doing?
He's doing really good. He's doing great. You want to bring him up? Yeah, why not?
Come on up. Yeah.
He's our little peanut guy. He's 7 pounds and now at 6 weeks old, but he's doing really, really well. Again, we couldn't imagine life without him. I was right in the hospital. I was telling my sister right away. I was like, I can't imagine that. Like, look how perfect he is, and we could have potentially terminated him, or he wouldn't be here with us. And he is just the sweetest little guy in the entire world. He's eating and pooping and doing all the things babies should do. We had the whole NICU team there. And he didn't need NICU time, which was he answered to prayer. He didn't need tube feeding. He's on a specialty bottle. He's gaining weight. Neurologically, he checked out okay. He met with every specialist possible in the hospital, and is honestly doing amazing. So we feel very blessed to have him here with us.
Yeah. So, looking back on your experience, what would you say you have learned through it all about God, about yourselves?
I'll try to be concise because I know that we're going over.
I'll
I feel like there's a lot.
Yeah.
So I think initially, too, I realized that I didn't really pray big things. I didn't pray boldly and confidently. I like to pray, but I always prayed for things that I thought God would give me, per se, or would answer. But I learned to just, initially I was just praying that it was just, praying for peace. And then my aunts and my family were just like, no, we're going to pray big. We're going to pray that his brain is healed. And if his brain's not healed, that he is completely normal. We're going to show all the doctors wrong. So pray boldly, pray confidently, trust in God, knowing that he might not answer those prayers, but he always turns bad situations into good situations. And also, this took a lot for me to remember, but that my children, including Eli, are God's children first. They're his children first and mine second. And that was really hard because, as mama bear, you're like, they're mine. They're all mine, always. But giving them to God, because they are God, they are a child of God, and then mine second, and I'm just here on earth to do what I raise them as I can for him. And then eternity. I just had to keep remembering that this isn't our home. And if he does suffer here, which I really pray that he's not going to, but it is short in the grand scheme of things, and we have heaven. And if we didn't have heaven, what would be the hope of anything? And I just had to keep thinking, that we are living to go to heaven, and eternity is what matters. So those were the things that happened that God gave to me, and then I know I already knew those things, but it just touched closer to home. And God always provides. So I will say though, you guys have been an awesome church. I feel very supported. I have friends that said that they maybe would have actually terminated because they have no support. They live out in Colorado. They have no one. They can't even have someone watch their 2 healthy children, let alone a child with disabilities. Where I had people instantly making meals, being there, helping to watch our other kids, offering assistance. And then also, I just feel like when Kory was saying that, so one of my biggest fears in general of any child is just being alone, right? Not feeling loved, not having friends, and just knowing that our church, even though small but mighty, that Eli will have some friends, right? And I really hope that the kids will accept him. Even if in school is challenging because he has a disability, at least at church he has his brother and his sisters, his cousins, which is amazing too. But to be able to walk into a place and feel comfortable and feel loved is huge. So if we can hopefully continue that would just be the absolute best thing ever and the biggest answer to prayer. Because I see in a lot of Facebook groups and I will echo what Kory said, that their children walk in to church, specifically church, and the kids just stare at them because they look different, especially with the cleft lip and palate. And the kid just cries and wants to go, doesn't want to be there. And so having those discussions with your children, that people look different, but we all are more alike than you think, and what a disability is, and just calling it out and talking about it. I've done that with my kids now. Before I never did. I never thought about it. And now it's maybe they have autism or there are challenges with them, but we are more alike than you think, and we're kind and loving to everybody, and we're all made in God's image, and we're all different. So those are huge things. and my heart has definitely softened, like I said, to those that have terminated or going through these things. Before I was staunchly, you're a terrible person if you abort. Not really, but that's, really like, no. And now my heart has softened to those, and I will say that I never did social media prior, and I am posting on this ACC group all the time. Like instantly when someone says they get the diagnosis. So we had my 20-week scan, our child has ACC, what to expect. And it's just like instant. It's amazing. Here's my son. I don't actually post a picture of him. Got to confirm that with them. But I say, he's doing great. He's doing great. He's wonderful. And like, we're praying for you, and I'm here to support you, even though you're away out in New Zealand and I'm in Minnesota. But having that support system and having those people to go to is huge. So someone who never responds to texts, never responds to emails, I do religiously respond to those with new diagnosis of ACC. Yeah. And I have a passion for that now.
All right. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks. Lord, we thank you for life, and we thank you that you are good and your love endures forever. And so I pray that as we wrestle with, even just these difficult situations where we're put in places where we never think that we would be, God, I pray that you would strengthen us, strengthen our faith. Help us to remember that life is good even when it's hard. I pray for Ben and Kirsti and the kids, for Eli especially, who I know will have to go through a number of surgeries and that. And, we don't know what the future holds there. But God, we just pray that you would have your healing hand upon him, and that you would just be with him and be with us as a church family. That there would be something that is really pricked in our hearts here about what it means to be family, more than just in name only, but to actually be family that cares for one another, that supports one another, that goes above and beyond, even further than we need to, just like we would for our families, our biological families. God, we thank you that you are with us, that you watch over us, and that you care for us. And I just pray that you would continue to teach us and grow us as your people, to be the kind of people that you call us to be. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.